Arknights, Endfield. What a game. At first, it looks like any other ordinary gacha game. Well, with a lot of marketing, advertising, hype behind it, what could go wrong? The next generation Arknights that is supposedly the future and sequel to the original Arknights storyline. Rarely you had a gacha game that usually continues their own personal storyline in a lot of these high quality gacha games nowadays. A lot of gacha companies, they always just started off with a small little indie like mobile gacha first, and then eventually when they got enough revenue, they will start a large scale gacha that was meant to be appealing for everyone. With Hoyoverse, it is Genshin Impact. With Kuro Games, it is Wuthering Waves. With Hypergryph, it's Arknights Endfield. So, do you have what it takes to shoulder the burden of multiple civilizations? Are you able to shoulder the responsibilities being the utmost important character in your storyline? So Arknights Endfield is not just another gacha. At first glance, you have your own headhunting, which is, well, gacha of course, with a 120 guarantee that is not going to be carried over if you are pulling on the limited banner. And there is also a regular banner where you have a chance to also obtain the limited character as well somehow. And it's just overall just looks like another kind of gacha where you also need to pull for their weapons. However, everything is just different. Firstly, you explore this game and then you have this very great first impression, just like every other gacha games out there. Eventually, you mellow down and has decided to settle down on this place on Telos 2 because of an incident, and you are trying to solve issues. What kind of issues, you say? Well, practical ones. Basically, you are an administrator. I don't really know what that actually means, but basically you are in charge of every single thing in Endfield Industries. And that means you are able to kickstart an industrial revolution anywhere you place down an AIC. And that's incredible. A lot of times when you talk about in gacha games, there are always going to be this thought behind your head that, oh no, I need to grind a lot of resources just to build my characters up. I need to grind so many copies of the same items or armors and gears over and over again to get randomized stats on my character so that they can min-max the best gear ever, right? Well, in Arknights Endfield, things are a little bit different per se. From when you are starting out in this hub zone, eventually you unlock several other hub zones as well, where you can actually build a sub PAC, which also is basically another hub zone where you can also build more factories on. The factory gameplay is probably the most polarizing topic for most players starting out. However, this game is actually very cool and very fun to play if you get the gist of it. You should always just explore and play the game yourself and have a feel of how the game feels to play first before actually going deep into this game, because there is going to be a lot of tutorials splattered onto your face that interrupts every single gameplay element, especially when you're starting on your first ever factory. And unfortunately, this is an issue where I think a lot of people will probably getting turned off by, but let's be real here, right? Nobody expected a normal gacha gamer to be able to comprehend what is the fun of building factories and having conveyor belts. I don't really think people are going to look at this as a normal person and just say, oh wow, this is fun. But what they did is that they put a lot of effort on trying to bring you on board this whole industrialized systems, and it just all works. A lot of the times when you're playing Arknights, you always been feeling like Arknights is a very unique gacha game because it's a tower defense. Hence why you need to strategize on the levels, and that, you know, certain levels need specific strategy to clear. I think it also applies the same thing in Arknights Endfield, and I think that is what makes this game so interesting and a breath of fresh air, because firstly, it's an open world, but it's not really that condescending. It's not really that overwhelming in comparison to something like Genshin Impact or Wuthering Waves or any other open world games prior to that. And it's an interesting take of an open world concept, but they minimize it in such a way that the open world does not feel very, let's just say very huge for no reason. And they nail it. There is no one time when I'm actually exploring the entirety of each of the open zones at Arknights Endfield that I actually feel tired exploring them. Every nook and cranny actually has their own secret, or just have certain mechanics that allows you to explore further into the map. Or maybe sometimes you saw some very glowy stuff on top of some buildings and maybe on top of a mountain, and you'll be figuring out like, okay, how can I get to that location? This game is built around exploration, and it just all works so well. Not to mention, there are certain zones where you cannot really have a hub base. Guess how you are able to, you know, bring in buildings or power through that place? The building relays. And the relays are very unique in the sense that you can actually pull one relay from literally your hub, and you can pull it and you can just connect them with literally hundreds of relays until the next map. So it is actually it's not exactly an instance zone that has a loading screen, but instead, whenever you cross this certain boundary, you are going to go into another zone. And because it's a completely open world kind of an experience, it doesn't feel very overwhelming. And it all just makes sense once you actually put in zip lines for easier travels between certain important places, and maybe you see some zip lines scattered around left by other players from their own worlds. Maybe you can repair them and use them as well, because it's actually going to bring you to very conveniently placed zip line connectors somewhere out in the map. Some players also actually put in zip lines and share them out just so that they can ease you in onto exploring the map even better. And a lot of the times when you find those jackpot memos alongside with, you know, good instructions or good information for you to actually uncover certain secrets in the open world, it just feels very fulfilling, just like how you play Elden Ring or Dark Souls, or just those games that allows you to, you know, leave messages on the ground. And I think Endfield is a culmination of like different games into one. So the combat is basically very simple, and I think it just works very well for a game like Endfield. Firstly, the combat I don't really think is their main focus here, hence why the combat has been dumbed down a lot in comparison to their original versions, if I'm not wrong, from the earlier betas. But at this point, the combat is just very straightforward. As long as you know when to time your skills and attacks and combos and your ultimates, it's just another game of pressing correct buttons at the right time. So you don't really have to be a very skillful player, but to able to enjoy the combat system in Arknights Endfield. And I think it's a good thing, because a lot of people who play action RPG games or just action open world games sometimes struggle with having good motor skills, especially if they are an elderly person, or if they are way too young. Probably they have a lot of skill issue. This game is just very pleasing, especially for people who are playing on the mobile devices, because it allows you to just focus on the most important part of the game, which is building factories. Now, I know when I say building factories is actually the main gameplay here, a lot of people might be assuming that it's going to be very, very boring, but hear me out, right? This is the only game where most of my friends playing this managed to reach the end game just because of how addicting the whole factory system is. I kid you not, players who usually just only play FPS games, players who never even started playing any gachas and always drop a free-to-play gacha all the time whenever the honeymoon period is out, all of them decided to just jump into this game because they see how many hours each of us actually put in to building our factories and the results that we produce from it and the characters that you decide to build, and everybody just can see each other's progress and you can assist each other whenever we are on their spaceships, which is the OMV Dijang, which you can unlock by just playing through the story. And eventually you also can play some very, very funny stock market things with the depot system, and you can actually, you know, as the more friends you actually are able to add, the more profits you can actually earn, because there will be more choices for you to sell off the for profits. And all in all, it makes a game that is very, very unique in the sense that you don't really need to do combat zones to farm for most of your requirements in order for you to progress your characters. I mean, sure, there are still some EXP items and some progression items that is going to be locked behind certain instances for combat, but you don't really need to focus on that yet at early game, especially because a lot of the progression things, like for example gearing up and making your armor sets, are literally from the factory. You can even make healing items, you can even make like bombs, you can even like create resources so that you can create even better resources by processing them in different factory nodes, and then eventually creating the batteries to actually power your generators, so that these generators would just, you know, generate even more power for you so that you can build even more factories and processes, and it just goes round and round and round. And I think it's because of this rotation that makes it so addicting. Now, don't get me wrong, right? I love combat in every gacha game there is. Of course, it depends on what kind of combat gameplay they are, but I think the fact that I'm able to max out a lot of my characters early on and have a proper main team and just utilizing the mechanics and the systems that's available inside Endfield really just makes it a little bit different than a lot of other gachas. Firstly, you do not need to farm a lot of things in this game. Your dailies, although there is a lot of things to need to do daily, it's not really overwhelming in a way that it's going to take you like a long time to do a lot of stuff. No, unlike other gacha games out there, there is, you know, the most mainstream ones, this game actually encourages you to not just explore the open worlds, but to also do some side quests here and there to unlock new features so that you can utilize those new features to earn even more resources. It's a resource management game first and a gacha game second, and I think that is what makes this game so fun. Now, I have spent like, I don't know how many endless sleepless nights to just make my character to reach to level 46, and it's not even like the end game yet. I'm actually going to be entering the new zone, which is Wuling City, and there will be another hub, and there will be like new systems, and the end game progression related stuff is going to start from there. And I just can't wait to see where this next zone of the next storyline is going to bring this whole story forward as well. If you are a person who actually known about the original Arknights story, you will be plentifully surprised on how many things that is related from the original game is going to be carried on forward into this game. Now, of course, you don't really need to understand Arknights lore in order to play Arknights Endfield, but if you know the lore behind on why there is so many animal-like races and why is there certain characters from the original Arknights game appearing in this game again, or why the administrator looks very familiar somehow, it all just makes sense that, Arknights Endfield seems to be in the future of whatever happened in Terra, in Arknights. And I think it's for the better, because unfortunately Arknights is just a little bit too dark for a lot of people, I suppose, just like a lot of earlier gacha games, starter games, I suppose. And it is just what it is, right? People are going to be gravitated towards Endfield because of the better graphics, the amazing art style, and the much more optimized game in comparison to like Arknights. So this is what it is. It's their magnum opus, and they have been developing this game for 5 years, and I think it all just makes very well good sense. It all just actually somehow works. And if you are a fan of something like factory gameplay, like Factorial or Satisfactory, or just literally even No Man's Sky systems, this game literally scratches that itch as well, because not only you can produce resources, you can utilize those infinite resources in a very, very creative way as well in the game. And it is what makes this game worthwhile to play. It's not that the game is forcing you to go through slops of story, because, well, the game do have some very, very slop kind of a storyline at the moment, but you can just press the skip button all the time. And for main story skips, you always have a summary at the end for you to read anyway, so you don't really need to like go through all of the NPC's dialogue. And I'm really, really glad that this game started with a skip function, because that is just a lifesaver, to be honest. So, do I recommend Arknights Endfield? Yes. There is a lot of controversies about the PayPal and incident and the whole gacha pity not carrying over, but to be honest, those are really, really minor issues compared to just playing this game as a free-to-play. At the moment, the game is going to give you a lot of pulls, especially because the game is just launched, and I just hope that people would just play this game normally and don't really like re-roll, because I think all of the characters in the game at the moment, even the 4-star characters, except for maybe Catcher, it's all just very, very competent characters, and you can pair them very well with certain teams if you know how to build teams and you look up at guides and stuff like that, I suppose. But I think in terms of like the gacha mechanics stuff, you don't really need to pull for weapons if you really, really want to just be extremely frugal at your pulling. And I've heard some people actually started to play the game without pulling anything at all, even if those pulls were free. So guess what? I also just pulled like 60 times on the character banners, and I have gotten 4 copies of 6 stars already. So I think my luck is all just got spent by just, getting like 2 copies of Adrelia before even getting her first free copy that was given to everybody. So but I got Ember as well, so whatever, right? But I think the most important part of this game is that just pick the character that you love playing, or pick the character that you think looks the best, and just proceed with the story. Nobody is stopping you from enjoying a factory gameplay. Nobody is going to care if you think this gameplay is tedious. If you think the whole buildings part is very, very tedious, you can always just borrow blueprints or just watch some blueprint guides videos on YouTube, or just from Reddit, or just from every other sources. And I think it will be pretty easy for you to actually just build a base completely using just thumb templates if you just watch certain content creators who've done it very, very well. And other than that, I think it's a very worthwhile gacha, very, very high quality Gacha because the developers literally rebuilt a Unity engine from the ground up just to make this high quality visuals work. Unfortunately, for certain people, their phones are not able to play this game because of how crazy the graphics was even on phones, but at least it's not Unreal Engine 5, so I don't really think there's any optimization issues on the PC version. So even if your computer is having like a GPU from 10 years ago or a decade ago, like the GTX 1060, you should be able to play the game fine even on higher settings. And I think that is a good thing, to be honest, because you know RAM prices and how bad it is today, right? So yeah, this is literally my first impression of Arknights Endfield, and I can't wait to go building more factories again in another area. The factory must grow, and I'll see you guys next time. Sayonara.